Welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast, everybody. My name is Steve Gum. Thanks so much for tuning in. I've got a great one for you guys today, and I'm really happy to bring this guy to you. Basically, it's been no secret that I'm a huge fan of the book Endurance, which, is a story of the Antarctic adventure of Shackleton and yada, yada, yada. I've talked about that so much. But I've just really been inspired by early explorers and the things that they endured and what they went through. And I think today, with so many entrepreneurs kind of using the same analogies with business, it's become, very glamorized, and, we take risks and we deal with all this stuff. Very rarely do I get to talk to somebody who's an actual explorer and who's in my backyard here in Chicago. So I'm so excited to actually kind of bring John's story to you guys, because I personally think that there's not enough attention put on guys like this nowadays. We spend so much time with these, pseudo celebrities and the idea of, fame. And there's people out there really pushing the limits of what's possible, right before your eyes. And we really kind of ignore a lot of these remarkable people. And John is one of these guys. So I'm so happy that he was able to come on and kind of share his story with you. We talk about a lot of things on this podcast. I won't kind of give it away, because he really, if you listen in, he gives so many really great nuggets of information and value that, it's just phenomenal. It applies to so many things in business and life. And here we are talking to a guy that is basically, he's a veteran of one of the first American expeditions to reach the North Pole unsupported. This guy has completed major expeditions to like the South Pole, Greenland. It's incredible. It's so much fun to talk to somebody who's been out there, and he really sees his expeditions as kind of values-based endeavors that push him beyond his perceived limits and challenge him to new levels of possibility. And that's what life is about. And it's guys like this that really show you what's possible and inspire me to push my limits, both professionally and personally. So anyway, I hope you like this one. Let's go ahead and talk to John. Hey, John, how are you doing today, man? Thanks a lot for jumping on the podcast.
I'm doing well. Happy to be here.
Hey, man, so I wanted to talk to you for a number of reasons. I think we were talking kind of pre-show. You have a profession that I personally am very jealous of, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs want to be the real adventure, courageous people out there. And what you're doing is, man, I've read books similar to what you do, and just the whole exploration and the danger and the excitement. It's amazing what you do. So I'm really excited to talk to you. And I guess for people that don't know who you are, can you just give them, I guess, a little bit of a background on who John Huston is?
Sure. I'm a polar explorer. And what that means in today's world is that I am more or less a professional athlete. And I go to very remote places in polar contexts, so contexts like the North Pole or the South Pole, Greenland, or different places in the Arctic that are seldom visited. And I'm also a motivational speaker. I work as a guide, and I consult with other expeditions and wilderness organizations kind of as a safety consultant as well.
Got it.
And I say in today's context, which is, we know the map of the world these days. And the original polar explorer is more like astronaut, like completely into the unknown. And today is more of expedition of self or telling a story.
Yeah, so, and I kind of got some glimpses of the film that you guys shot there off of your website, and I'll make sure and share that with everybody. But for a guy like you, I'm always fascinated, like, how does one, get into this type of profession? Did you know what I mean? Does it go from like Boy Scouts on up? How did you fall into going on these type of expeditions, man?
Yeah, if someone had tapped me on the shoulder even when I had graduated college, when I'd already gotten the bug for the wilderness, if someone had tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, you're gonna ski to the North Pole one day," I'd be like, "That sounds just totally awesome, but how the heck is that gonna happen?" And I guess I just kept following my passion and wanderlust. When I was a little boy, 4 or 5 years old, I asked my mom to read me the Kon-Tiki story, Thor Heyerdahl's great book. I asked her to read it to me over and over and over, and then I really wanted to be Indiana Jones, so much so that I dug up their backyard with a shovel. And I went on to study archaeology in college and also with a history major at Northwestern. And really loved like the biographical stories of, you know, how people achieve things against the odds or achieve greatness or succeed. And so I don't know, I just eventually got into outdoor education and kind of felt that was my niche that combined a lot of my different interests, and ended up working at Outward Bound, which is the original wilderness education and leadership school. This school that I worked at was in northern Minnesota, and from there I got into winter expedition travel and dog sledding and cross-country skiing, and just kept going.
Man, that's crazy. So do you do it now for, you know, I don't even know how to ask this. I mean, is it really like almost like a self-challenge, or are you out there for like scientific purposes?
The expeditions I do, I have been part of scientific expeditions where that's the primary goal, and those expeditions are not typically as mobile. There's more of a base camp setting where you're taking readings, and that's like the focus. I've been in those sorts of expeditions as a guide, but the expeditions like, you know, when I skied unsupported to the North Pole or I skied to the South Pole, those are for the challenge of it. So it's more of a personal challenge, and, you know, you want to push yourself, you want to extend yourself into your own unknown. It's kind of like a goal in anybody's life. It's just what my kind of own skill set has taken me to. So some people might write a book or find something new to research and publish. And so big polar expeditions are kind of that for me. We'll do a little bit of science along the way, but it's secondary to the primary goal, which is either to get to someplace or to make a film about our journey.
Now, how often are you out there? I mean, the conditions have to be, I mean, unlike anything else. I mean, how often are you out there thinking, oh boy, I've got myself in a jam?
Well, there's been a few times where, you know, the success of the expedition is in doubt.
Got it.
And then, like, on a daily basis, we're like constantly getting ourselves out of jams or preventing jams from becoming catastrophes. Because,
like what? Give me an example.
Like in the cold, for example, it's a relentless environment, and we are the warmest things out there. So it might be 40 or 50 or 60 below. And when you get cold, you can't like flip on the heater or start your car on a polar expedition or start a fire even. I mean, you have to change what you're doing. And you know, I studied a lot of these historic explorers, and the kind of the ones I fell in love with were the lesser known explorers who didn't have the big dramatic elements that make their stories, you know, prime media fodder or are well remembered through history because they were great planners, and they were also humble. Like the guys who were successful and came back with all their fingers and toes. Yeah. Were the ones who are able to adapt and to change. And the only way when you're too cold, the only way you're gonna warm up there is to change what you're doing. And as soon as you start to get lazy or like, oh, I don't want to do what I need to do, you're gonna pay a price, and you might end up with bloody feet from blisters or frostbite, and that starts to impact the success of the expedition. It's all kind of like a mental vibe, like an expedition mindset that you commit yourself to, but it's relentless. So that's kind of like the little jams that we're always battling with. No, it's cool. Now, you do a lot of, obviously, motivational speaking. You speak to business groups and all kinds of stuff. What do you think, in terms of the, you know, the similarities or the habits or the traits? I mean, because you're in essence, and, you know, before the show you had even mentioned, I mean, really, a lot of people don't understand. I mean, you're an explorer, you're doing all this really cool stuff, but at the end of the day, you know, it's also a business that you're running. I mean, that's not free to do. So you've got all of the elements of operating your own entrepreneurial venture in and of itself. But, you know, additionally, how much do you think you've learned, or how
relatable is kind of an expedition to, building something, a business or what have you that, obviously your life's not threatened, but in terms of the methodology is relatable.
I think there's a lot of parallels. I mean, when we started our expedition project, we had this great idea. We wanted to ski unsupported to the North Pole, and at the time, no Americans had done that. And we're like, all right, so where are we going to start? And we were starting from nothing. We had the idea. We had some personal experience and a little bit of a network. But it was just like, it's just like someone starting a company. And my partner and I, what we did is we sat down and we're like, we're going to have to sell ourselves. We're going to have to raise over $200,000. We're going to have to sell the idea of this project to sponsors and to donors and to people who want to support it. So we hammered out our values right then and there, kind of like our thesis statement for how we wanted to operate as a company or a team. And really, it was just unbelievable how much we went back to those values, to tell ourselves to because that's, we're selling naturally who we are.
Yeah.
And also to help us guide us through tough decisions, like this decision that we're facing as far as whatever it's just a portion of the plane or sponsorship, or whether it's how to get along better or make a decision on the ice that's going to be critical. We would often just sit there and say, we're stumped. Let's look at how this fits with our values, and it would get us past the crux. It was immensely helpful. So I think, that's one example, and there's a lot of similarities, like the singleness of focus. It's like a willingness to devote your life to something and prioritize. There's we work for ourselves, so there's like a certain obsession with what we're doing and how much legwork and preparation goes into like the launch of a company or the launch of an expedition. I think is very similar. Like I kind of say that, or I found through studying and talking to other explorers and kind of adopted the notion that the preparation is the expedition. Like, there's a lot of famous explorers, but the ones who were most successful were the ones who were extraordinarily detailed and proficient and self-critical in their preparation phase.
So how much preparation do you guys do before an expedition, like in terms of like time? I mean, how long are you guys preparing before you actually, head off?
Our North Pole trip, we prepared for about 3 years.
No kidding. Wow.
And other trips are less intense or just different. It might be like 2 years. 2 years is about, I'd say, average for me.
No kidding.
Preparation.
Preparing 2 years for each. And then how long is an expedition, John?
Most of these trips are 2 months long. So we're away from home from 3 to 4 months, and then we're on the ice for 50 to 70 days.
Wow. Now, do you feel kind of I guess a bond with history? Because it's fascinating. I don't know. I guess with some reality TV, it's there's a little bit of a fractional amount put on it, but back in the day, I mean, you guys were like the superstars of the world, right? I mean, these expeditions were all the rave. Media attention was crazy, and I guess, do you think that we've kind of lost that mojo or that vibe or that excitement for exploration in this country?
That's a good question. I mean, historically, you're exactly right. Polar explorers were front page newsmakers, big time, and they're on the speaking circuits and all over the place. And I don't know. I think today it just changed venues. I feel that there's so many different people exploring so many different things, like the internet pioneers or people finding a different way to do something or solve a problem. Like, those are all explorers. And I mean, the nationalistic sense of it, I think, has changed a lot.
Yeah.
Like the space race and the race for the poles, there was a lot of nationalism involved. Like Norway was the first to the South Pole. That was a big deal for that country. And we were the first to the moon. That was a huge deal. And I think that sort of team America or team country throwing its resources behind something as a common goal is like an empowering spirit that our generation probably doesn't know.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, you know, and I think I mentioned it briefly to you, but I mean, the book Endurance, have you read that book?
Yeah, I read it in one night.
Yeah, I know. It's like, it's funny because people, you know, whatever, in the entrepreneur circles, like, oh, what's the best book? And blah, 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 you know, for business. And that, I tell everybody, that is the best business book that I've ever read is Endurance.
Alfred Lansing's Endurance, right?
Totally. I mean, and it has nothing to do with business. It's just like teamwork added. I mean, it's just, like you said, I mean, you can't put that book down. And so when I look at your life and what you're doing, like, I think in my head, like, that's kind of the type of scenarios that go on and just that type of perseverance and that test of will. I mean, I can't think of anything that really tests a human being and kind of where your mind must go on adventures like that. I mean, do you feel a sense of like kind of carrying on that type of legacy in what you're doing?
Yeah, in a certain way, I feel that it's two-faceted. Like, I think it's cool to be, or I feel very fortunate to kind of be in the same paragraph or story that's part of the polar exploration history story that Shackleton and Roald Amundsen were part of. I think that is like, I'm kind of tickled by that, I guess. And
yeah.
At the same time, I'm really kind of careful to, like, you know, we have so many. The playing field is not the same playing field that those guys went through. So, like, those guys were the true pioneers, and I try to kind of model myself after what made them successful and kind of conduct my own career in a way that I think they would respect, I guess.
Yeah.
It's so easy to make claims and to make a lot out of a first or something like that. But, you know, I try to honor the people who really went first. And I don't know if the listeners know Ernest Shackleton. I mean, can I tell a little backstory here?
Oh, dude, please, yeah.
Ernest Shackleton in 1914, his goal was to cross the Antarctic continent, which had never been done at that time. And so this was at the eve of World War I. He departed Britain and sailed down to the Weddell Sea in Antarctica. And they never actually made it to the Antarctic continent. I think he had 27 men with him. And the reason they never made it is their ship was beset in ice floes of the ocean, and it was trapped. And they tried, they couldn't free it. And eventually the ship was crushed by the pressure of these ice floes, and Shackleton and his 27 men they had to abandon ship and pull the 3 lifeboats as their only mechanism of travel, and they lived on the ice. They shot seals and penguins later on, and they're out there for several months. And eventually, I mean, to make a long story short, Shackleton makes this miraculous, like, 800-mile open boat journey aiming for South Georgia Island, which is a little Norwegian whaling station in the far South Atlantic. And he makes it there, and they're able to organize a rescue, and all of his men lived. And the story was kind of rediscovered in the late 90s, and the journals these men wrote were often brimming with, like, how happy they were with life.
Yeah, yeah.
And Shackleton was just such a master at group dynamics and morale and keeping the spirits where they needed to be to succeed. But in his case, to live. I mean, he knew that how the power of a negative mindset could turn a whole team against itself and could mean the difference between life and death for those people. And there's been a lot of kind of explications of his journey as, business management themes and things like that.
Yeah, that's one of the most fascinating things in that whole book to me is just the diaries of the guys, that were going through that. And to your point, I don't know if it was just a exceptional ability to select people for that voyage, or what, because they really, I don't know. I mean, they're going through stuff that pretty much looked like, by all intents and purposes, they weren't going to make it. And, the diaries of these guys, they were so positive, and they would find the positive in almost anything. And to have that kind of leadership and that kind of the management ability of Shackleton when you're reading that story is so fascinating.
Right.
It's just something that it just goes to show you. I mean, the power of a unified team and attitude and leadership. I mean, again, I could go on and on about that book. I mean, it really is just, I've probably read it 12 times. I mean, I still can't believe it. I wish they would make like a real motion picture out of that thing.
Yeah, there was a
Yeah, I saw that. It was okay. I mean, like someone should come out and be like, we need to
you want Sean Connery. You want the big. Shackleton's story is a big inspiration, and what kind of he actually did to keep his men healthy mentally and to make them such a successful team. I think he did have the right people in a lot of cases. I think a lot of it was this force of positive nature. And I've been around a few people who are modern explorers who I'm kind of like, wow, this guy is the most optimistic force of nature I have met. And they make the impossible seem possible.
Yeah.
And they bring you to another level. And it was really, I mean, it's cliche to say, the sum of the parts is, the whole is greater than the sum of parts. But I think, Shackleton's case is the case for that. And I think he also is just a master of, he's just like a fantastic coach. Like, he knew what buttons to push. He knew who to put with who. He knew when to say what. He knew his men in and out. The funny thing about the Shackleton story is that he wasn't the greatest planner in the world. And I'll talk about this in some of my lectures, is that, if you're in dire straits, or you're really trying to keep you have something that seems like a huge opposition, then Shackleton's your man. But if you're like looking for long-term planning and stable foundation and success, like through preparation and research and self-analysis and execution, then Roald Amundsen, the Norwegian, he's a genius of leadership, and he's the first to the South Pole and the first to the Northwest Passage. And he was so extraordinarily humble. In some ways, some of the British guys were not, that he was able to incorporate aspects from other cultures and other ways of doing things in his own model, because he was such a good synthesizer. Whereas some of the British explorers of that same golden age refused to do, and it cost them dearly in some cases.
Yeah, are you and your team, are you like naturally optimistic?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a big optimist. I'm kind of I'll like see critical things, like what needs to be fixed. That's kind of my lens.
Got it.
But yeah, we're big on optimism out there. Like, we have one of our 3 expedition rules is no complaining. Complaining is not allowed on expedition.
What are the other 2?
The other 2 is so there's no complaining. Complaining is not allowed in the tent, and at the same time, you got to be realistic and solve problems. But we're not going to whine out there about things we can't control. And the second rule is that while your body can do a lot, if your mind will let it, which basically says, well, you know, these are physical undertakings. Skiing to the North Pole is physical, but it's really 75% a mental ballgame. How you interpret things you can't control, and different variables, and little things that don't go right, and how you interpret all those things will create your own experience, and that has a huge factor. So we kind of say a person can achieve whatever their mind allows them to. You just have to really focus and dial into positive mindset. And our number one goal, and this isn't my own, this is from a Norwegian guy who I've worked with a lot, but we've adopted it. It is to simply say nice things to each other, which sounds pretty cute, but it's totally true. There's a big difference between a team that's supportive and funny and enjoys what they're doing and smiles, that even when it's stressful and there's deadlines and things look dire, if you can still maintain that joy for the moment and like, okay, acceptance of the lot and keep moving forward with a positive vibe, you're going to increase your chances of success greatly.
Man, that's so cool. Now, do you guys like practice that in, like you said, you lead up 2 or 3 years to an expedition, or just in your daily personal life? Are these things that have kind of been ingrained in you that you practice on an ongoing basis?
I will admit it's easier on the expedition because it's such a singular focus.
Yeah.
When you're on an expedition, there's no emails or phone calls or external variables. It's very, very focused. But yeah, I mean, we do practice that, and we do a lot of physical training, and we support ourselves in that and cheer ourselves on. And it's kind of, it's a physical thing to train, but it's also like a mental investment that you know what's coming and you're committing to it.
I gotta say, man, those 3 rules are so brilliant. In really any circumstances, they really, for you guys to apply them with such a focused effort on an expedition, I guess, in daily life and in business, right, when you're trying to accomplish a goal, why do you think people lose sight of these 3? Because they seem fairly obvious. I love the fact that you guys inject them with such focus, like these are the rules of the expedition. But why do you think like entrepreneurs and business people kind of lose sight of this level of teamwork and focus and kind of camaraderie when they're going about trying to accomplish anything?
Well, I mean, I've lost sight of them. I mean, I think people are human, and I think when we select our team, we are very careful to choose people we have kind of similar motivation of shared values and kind of trust. And, trust can get violated. And you can perceive trust to be violated sometimes just based on how something was said or a person's mood. And I think I don't know, we're really big on feedback on the expeditions too.
Yeah.
Like, we try to, I'm not always the best at it. Sometimes some of my hardest times in the ice where I've gotten in power struggles with a teammate because we're too busy or too focused on other seeming priorities than to take time to check in about how we're working together. And then, you have to be vulnerable and be able to like take feedback and give feedback, and it's a learned skill, I feel. And sometimes some teams are better at it than others, but we really try to structure that in, because it sounds funny, but if you don't are able to get off your macho horse and talk about how you feel and how you're impacting each other, then you can create a mess. It's also, I don't know, I think the world is busy and complicated. There's a lot of variables flying around. I think those team retreats or little morale boosters like eating meals together and having side projects together that have nothing to do with your main goal in business, but are fun and experiential. Those are all part of building your team.
Yeah. How many, I guess, kind of taking a different path here, how many guys like you are there? I mean, like in terms of I don't even know what you'd call it, explorers. I mean, how many of you guys are there, roughly doing the, polar exploration like you guys are doing?
It's a pretty small community. In the States, it's pretty small. There's a handful of us who do these big trips. We all know each other. And in Norway, there's probably a lot more than here, but there's more people doing mountaineering and sailing, and there's all types of different professional outdoor athletes out there, but the polar explorer community is pretty small.
Yeah, and I mean, you've been like, what is it? Just because of your affiliation with the university and etc. that keeps you here in Chicago, or was it a kind of a strategic thought process to base yourself here?
I fell in love with my wife in Chicago.
There you go. Slam dunk answer. You can't beat that. No, but no, it's cool because it's interesting. Like when I kind of discovered you and what you're doing, I mean, the idea that there was a guy doing what you're doing right here in my backyard, basically. I mean, I was kind of like, wow, damn, it's super cool. I just think that the number of people doing what you're doing, or what, entrepreneurs and just business folks in general, or really anybody, right, can learn from a guy like you, or just can kind of absorb from the experience that you experience. Man, I just think it's so cool. And I don't know if enough people, realize we've got a guy like you right in our backyard. And, maybe I'm patting you on the back here, but it's super cool to me. I mean, again, it's one of those things where I think every guy wants to say, man, you know what? I'm an explorer. I could go out there and take a stab at that, but dude, I mean, what you guys do is, I mean, it's kind of crazy, I mean,
yeah. I feel really fortunate to be doing what I'm doing. I mean, I sit behind the computer a lot for my work at Northwestern or for different aspects of expedition work. So it's not all time on the ice. There's a lot of legwork, and there's a lot of marketing, and there's talks to prepare and networking. So yeah, I get to go out and be Indiana Jones.
It's so awesome, man. So John, when you look back years from now, man, how do you hope you have made your mark?
I think looking back, if people see my story as a positive story or like a positive beacon, then I would be really happy. I mean, I watch very little TV because I can't stand how sensationalist and how dramatic and how negative so much of the news is. And I really feel our society needs more positive stories, and stories of people achieving things against the odds, or helping other people meet their own goals, or just a positive achievement rather than scandal and things that go wrong or that are most commonly reported. So if I can be remembered as having a positive story that maybe pushed other people in a positive direction, then that would be just great.
Man, I love it. And can't thank you enough, dude, for carving out the time to talk with me here today. And I know you're doing so many great things out there, John. And again, I think I hope you I always say this to people that are doing like what you're doing, is I hope you take a step back every once in a while and just kind of go, damn, I'm really doing some amazing stuff here. Because I think, from the outside looking in, even though I know, you guys are behind a computer a lot and all that jazz, but the rarity that you are in that profession, and kind of the, even for me, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a regular guy, but I draw inspiration from people doing the extreme. So I see a guy like you, and this sounds a little crazy, but it like motivates me to do the smallest thing, whether it's get up a little earlier or go to the gym. It's kind of like you prove what's possible if you put your mind to it. And I, again, I hope you guys step back and realize truly how inspirational, how much you motivate probably a lot of people that never actually tell you that. But it's guys like you that really push the envelope on what's possible and really inspire everybody, even though, we're not doing things that I would consider as nearly as exciting, obviously, but in anything that we're trying to accomplish in life, myself, my peers, my family, people that I'm around, it's people like you that go out there and really kind of set a bar that, while may not be achievable in a real world sense for people that aren't explorers, I just want to thank you for what you do, man. It's awesome, and you're to be applauded for it, dude.
Well, thanks. That's a big compliment. I mean, I totally acknowledge my story is like entertaining and unique and fun for people to follow along, but it's just the venue is different. There's people achieving incredible stuff in all different facets of life and profession, and I think those stories just aren't as easily told or aren't as they don't grab you as quickly. You have to dig for them a little bit, but I think there's a lot of people doing incredible stuff.
Yeah, man, I love it. So if people want to kind of learn more, I'll have stuff in the show notes, links to your website and all that. But what's the best place for people to find you?
My website is johnhuston.com, just like the Hollywood director.
All right.
Huston.
And I will have that. Yeah, I'll make sure that's in the show notes for everybody, and I'll link up. And yeah, man, keep doing what you're doing. And anytime we can kind of shine a light on anything that you're doing out there, I love to do it, John, because it's just really cool stuff. And I think, I just hope more people, the folks listening to this, kind of gravitate towards it and put more focus on, and learn from, what you're doing. Because to your point, there's so much garbage out there, and when you can kind of grasp onto people that are doing positive, inspirational things and moving the boundaries of what's possible, I mean, I wish there was more of that. And I just got to thank you for kind of allowing me to tell the story a little bit, man.
Thanks.
Well, that's it for another edition of the Make Your Mark podcast, everybody. John, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I hope you guys got a lot out of this one. I mean, it was a lot of fun. And again, you can find links to John's website. It's actually John Huston, JohnHuston.com. You can learn more about John and what he's up to. And I'll have links to his Twitter and Facebook and all that in the show notes, so definitely check that out. But again, everybody, thank you very, very much for tuning in. I hope you got a lot out of this. And until next time, my name is Steve Gum, and I'm out of here.